Hi, folks. You're with us today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about fake asylum seeker claims. Now, it's going on all over the West, in Australia, the United States, Britain, Canada, everywhere. And Western governments seem, by and large, to be all too keen to accept these fake claims, even when they're proved to be fake, which is interesting. So, I'll talk about one example here. Now, it's important to understand just how much help these illegals are getting and how organized the scam is. So you've got United Nations people working with NGOs, working with elements inside the bureaucracy, the immigration bureaucracy in Western countries, that in turn are working with the courts and various systems of alleged justice around the place. So it's quite coordinated, and the forces that are wanting the fake asylum claims to succeed are better funded and far more organised and numerous than the folks on the other side. And there's no question that certain candidates from certain fake claims from certain countries are being treated in a tactical and strategic sense as important. We have to win with this. So the NGOs and the fake asylum seeker people, again, numerous United Nations all over the place, they're saying we have to win this, because if we win this case from that country under these circumstances, that'll set a precedent, and then millions can come through. And that's all good. So that's the scam that they set up, and they're quite good at it, as much because no one's pushing back rather than because they're particularly good per se. But here's an example. There a couple of asylum seekers. They alleged asylum seekers. They arrive in a first world country from a third world country. Now, when I say third world, the average annual income of people in this country is about $3,000. They've got a much lower cost of living but they live communally. They have to get by. It's a dirt poor shithole. It's always been that way and always will be, with outrageous levels of corruption and incompetence in government and so on. So why wouldn't people like that or from those places want to move to? But they don't want to move and to integrate and become Western citizens. They want to take the free stuff, and they're economic migrants. They're not asylum seekers. That's nonsense. And as soon as they get to and because they live in large family and communities, as soon as they get to a first world country, they want to bring over the whole village so they can live just as they were over there with all their aunts and uncles and nephews and cousins and second cousins and so on. They're quite primitive people in many ways. So anyway, they arrive in Australia falsely claiming asylum. That their claims investigated at an administrative level, and it's very clear that they've committed perjury on all their documentation. They weren't fleeing anything at all, and they went to another country, the nearest country nearby, and were granted automatic asylum there. They didn't even have to go through a process. They were just given it. But they decided, no, we only want asylum in a first world rich country. That's the only place we want to go for asylum. And so they thought, well, let's just fake. We'll bribe a few officials in our own country, and then we'll arrive in a first world country, and we'll just say that we were. We're persecuted and with this, with that. Anyway, it's all bullshit. So that's discovered, and they're going to be deported. But suddenly, an army of NGOs, United Nations funded NGOs, an army of people suddenly come to their rescue. Now, over a period of years, they've every court they go to, they lose the case based on the same facts, that they have no claim for asylum and that they've committed perjury throughout. So, but no court will refuse to hear it. What courts can do is to say, well, you've already lost this case. We're not going to hear it, and that would be the end of it. But somehow, the court administration in all the different courts they've tried, and they've shopped around and bounced around to every court, somehow they're able to get the court administration to accept the case. I don't know how they do that. Most people can't do that. In fact, very few people can do that. So you've got people who are in a first world country illegally, they've committed perjury, they faked all their documents and their claims and allegations, and yet still courts are prepared to hear it on some sort of vague notion of, humanitarian grounds or something. No one quite knows. But they all get these, so they go to court to court to court, and move. This is all very expensive. Now, if you look at the legal costs of these people, it's come to about $600,000 in legal costs. Now, that's all paid for. The first world country taxpayer is paying for pretty much all of this, and the rest is being topped up from like United Nations refugee funds and things like that, the smaller part of it. So really the taxpayers, white taxpayers, are funding this illegal claim from people who don't have any right to be in the first world country as it is, and who faked all their documents. So now on top of that, though, they couldn't afford to stay in a first world country. So an NGO or a private citizen who's funded by an NGO, who in turn funded them, has paid for all their food, rent, transport, all their costs. And they haven't been living on, stale bread and water or something like that. They've been living well and eating well, and living in a nice place, wearing nice clothes. They've had all the mod cons. Nothing's been, far better standard of living they could ever have hoped for in the country they came from. So this is all being paid for by NGOs. Now, I don't know why that's allowed. While somebody is in a going through a legal system like this, why should they be permitted to have such huge largesse, put their way, and which is critical to them being able to stay in the first world country and make these fake claims. So this is how the scam goes. Now, this is $360,000 was given to them free by these activist NGOs. So we're talking just shy of $1 million has been given to illegal aliens who've committed perjury and faked their documents, also they can get to stay in a first world country. Now, if I go to court over something, no one's going to give me $1 million. So why are they specially entitled? Well, the reason is they come from a country in the world where they now want, the globalists now want a steady and free flow of migrants, part of the mass migration scam, and so they want this precedent there. So when the illegals arrive, which they will, then they'll be able to just flood through the gates without really having to meet much of much resistance from the government or from bureaucrats and officials and so on. But it's important we understand that the NGOs are able to work closely with the court administration, the supposed law courts, and they work closely with the United Nations and various other activist groups. Whether these activist groups are within Western bureaucracies, it doesn't matter, but they're able to work together to make sure that these outcomes, that the people themselves are just pawns in the game, that these outcomes are achieved. And if you look at the time, the money, the expense, the corruption of our legal system, the corruption of our bureaucratic system in the West that's occurring, then you can see the scale of it and just how determined these people are to bypass the laws that the parliaments have voted into law. And it's very, very concerning to see, but the extent of it. And so again, just came back, illegal aliens committed perjury in all their documents, have lost numerous appeals, but they keep getting appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal, all funded, all paid for by other parties. And not one single court was prepared to throw out their appeal. Now, all it would have taken would have been one court, but somehow because that's not a judge doing that. That's the court administration deciding to accept those cases. In every situation, every instance, those cases were accepted, and that allowed them to stay in the first world country and keep on appealing. So it just goes to show you that just how deep this corruption runs in all over the Western countries, and we need to put a stop to it. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.